Miss Gaines, thank you so much
Yes,
for taking the time to join us today.
thank you for
We
having me.
always like for our guests to start off by introducing themselves to the audience and tell us a little bit about who you are.
I am Olivia Gaines. I am a USA Today best-selling author of contemporary romances. I am local here in Augusta. I do live in South Augusta, and I write contemporary romances. And I am an avid reader. I love quilting. So sometimes you'll see me at the local quilt shop hanging out as well. But that's basically me in a nutshell. I spend a lot of time in this room finding ways of making people fall in love.
Finding ways of making people fall in love. Well, that sounds like a good thing to do. Now,
Especially for Black love.
do you know, have you had much success with that?
Actually, I have when it comes to writing. And
Mhm,
I've been married 35 years myself. So
mhm,
I'm okay with it. I don't consider myself to be an aficionado or anything, but I think love is a wonderful adventure, especially
mhm.
when both people are invested in the process, invested in growing together and building a life together. And that's what I write. It's not just about a boy finding a girl or a man finding a woman. It's
Mhm.
about two people finding a way to build a life together.
Okay. All right. Well, that's awesome, your take on that. And that's an interesting topic because I think a lot of us who think about such things have spent time in conversation about the current status of relationships among
Yes,
African Americans,
yes.
particularly those of us with children. I have two children in their 20s. And I'll be honest, they say, Mom, don't worry about it. But sometimes I think about it and I just wonder what the future holds for them, if there will ever be the types of traditional relationships that people a few generations back thought of and
Okay.
expected to be normal. So I'm just curious about your perspective as someone who spent a lot of time thinking and writing about that topic.
I think what we're going to see in the next couple of years is it's going to circle back because the things that we all want, which is having somebody to come home to who understands us, who listens to us, to have a household where you feel safe, you feel comforted, you feel like this is where we make our stand. I think we're going to come back to that. Right about now, I think social media has had a tremendous toll on our self esteem, who we are, and accessibility to people you once would have never been able to date. And now, with just the use of your phone, you've got access to all of these people. But are they quality relationships? And I think that we're going to go back to having those quality relationships because that's what people, in essence, really want somebody to share their life with.
I think people do too. I mean, certainly folks from my generation
Yes.
thought about it that way. And I think about how this has probably evolved. Um, um, I think, previous generations thought of it as a way to um, get fed and clothed and
Mhm.
housed and all of those things.
Yes,
It was a
yes,
matter
yes,
of
yes.
survival. Then there were those who thought about relationships and marriages as a fulfillment of God's plan for our lives.
Correct.
And then there are those in later generations who just thought about the companionship aspect. You might have been able to make a living by yourself, but um, you wanted a companion, someone to share life with, exactly how you put that. And now I'm not sure what folks want.
Like I said, we're coming back to it because I think you and I are the same generation, Gen X. And when we were growing
I'm
up,
not, but that's okay. I'm at the tail end of the baby boom, but thanks for the compliment.
okay, and I'm the opening end of Gen X. So we're right about in the same window, maybe a
Yeah,
year or
yeah,
two,
we
give
are.
it a year or two. I'm older than I look. But when we were growing up, you went to college, and when you went to college, you found your partner, you found your life mate, you found somebody who had similar values to your own, and you built this family, you built this community, you built this network where you had your friends and all of the people who were your own little village. I think we have lost sight of those small villages that we used to have that made us more than family by blood, but by a shared belief system, and what we wanted for our families with church and community as well. And like I said, people are coming back to that because they want a spiritual center. They want some kind of grounding force so they don't feel like they're out there just flailing, trying to figure it all out.
Right. And that's a good way to put just flailing because
Yes,
that's where
yes,
I really feel like people are right now. So now that you've told us that your feeling is that there will be a shift, how
yes.
long is it going to take for that shift to take place? Is that something we look for in the next 5 years or the next generation?
I'm thinking in the next 3 to 5 years because you have a lot of women now who are homeowners. And I say that there's going to be a shift because it's one thing to have all of those wonderful little toys and gadgets, but sometimes you want to share your toys.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
you want somebody to do things with, you want somebody to go places with. And for a moment there, it had gotten to the point where I don't need a man. And it's not so much as needing a man or needing a woman. It's about feeling not necessarily whole or complete, but having somebody to walk that journey with. Because no
Okay.
matter where you're going, sometimes it's okay to go alone, but sometimes you
Mhm.
don't want to. Sometimes you just want to be able to reach out and know that there's somebody there beside you. And I think a lot of people are missing that feeling of security of knowing that somebody has my back.
Security is a very appropriate thing, appropriate
Mm.
way to think about this.
Yes.
Um, I just think about my own journey. I have been married now for 27 years, or will be 27 years in May. And I was one of the ones that never really thought that much about getting married.
Mhm.
You know, it was just kind of like, really? Okay. I
Well, I
tell
have to do.
I tell people that, I lived in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is right outside the District of Columbia.
Mhm.
I lived there for about 3.5 years, right after I completed graduate school. And when I was living in Prince George's, I never really thought much about getting married. It just sort of never crossed my mind because I was surrounded by mostly single people. If
Mhm.
I looked around my workplace, um, but there were a few people who were married, those who were in their, say, 40s. I was still in my 20s. And the group in my age group, I mean, there are very few of them who were married.
Mhm.
Same thing with others, my neighborhood, a lot of singles and things. I just never gave getting married much consideration. And then I moved to Albany, Georgia, where everybody was married.
Yes.
So it was the norm to be married there. And even at the younger ages, people much younger than I was in my late 20s when I moved there, they were all married or getting married or something like that. And it was sort of like I was the odd one out because I wasn't married. They just found that to be weird. And people would say that to me.
Mhm.
What's up with that? Why you never married?
Ew.
And
What's wrong with you, girl? Mhm.
luckily nobody said it to me that way, but that's probably what they were thinking.
Mhm.
It was just, to me, it was environmental. It's like I was in a place where not many people were married, so I didn't think about it. Then when I got to Albany, it was like, I guess I should be thinking about this. And I think that consistency, security, um,
Community.
community,
Mhm.
um, just partnership, all those things have made me realize that marriage really wasn't that bad of an idea after all. um, and I hope that we get to a point where our current generations do kind of see it that way too.
Right.
However, don't want it to get to a point where people just say, "Oh, you're an old maid. You've never been married. You're an old maid. Pitiful you." That's what I
Yeah.
think. There's got to be a happy medium somewhere in between. Don't.
Well, that's what I kind of tackled in Show Me. I have a 40-year-old college professor from a very large family. His immediate family is 64 because there are like 12 of them, and he's number nine, and he's the only one that's not married. And because he's a college professor, he teaches kids basically. And then, every weekend or every family function, there are kids everywhere, and he doesn't want it. And he is marrying someone who is unable to have children. And I wanted to kind of talk about that in the story as to how we ostracize friends and family who don't have kids, not understanding maybe they can't have them, or knowing that they can't have them, trying to get them to adopt or take on family members' kids. We have one ourselves, and I never forget finding out that I wasn't able to have anymore. But going around my family and his family, the constant question was, well, when are you going to have any more? Or when our son got to be about 6, we had family members trying to add kids to our vehicle. You know, you just can't give me a random child. No, it doesn't work like that. But I wanted to kind of touch on those topics that even if people don't have kids, you can still have a fantastic and a wonderful relationship, which is what Peter and Kimberly ends up having, and they have friends as well who don't have kids. They call them dinks, dual income, no kids. Uh,
Mhm,
and Kim and Peter are dinkwads. They're dual income, no kids with a dog.
mhm.
And
And I
so,
was a sing, which means I was a single income, no kids.
yes. Yeah. And so they find a community, they find friends that want to do the same things they want to do, and they have an entire community of dinks where they can do things and not feel ostracized and not feel weird for not having kids or not wanting kids.
Okay. All right. So you write this. Is where's your inspiration come from to write these stories? How did you get into romance novels? What made you think that was a thing? Why does it interest you?
I grew up reading Harlequins, and as I got to high school and got to college, I'm like, I don't know any of these women. And I'm a journalist by trade, so I've always wanted to be a novelist. And I had been teaching locally at one of the colleges, and I had just got completely burned out. And my husband's like, you've been teaching people to write for so long, why don't you write? And as I sat down and I started writing, the first thing that came to me was a romance. And there are several local romance novelists, and I connected with a couple, and she was writing mail order brides, and it was the traditional mail order brides. And me being me, I'm like, well, I'm going to write mail order brides too. But her name's going to be Laquita, and she's going to live in Compton, and she's going to marry a guy that lives in a yurt on the side of a mountain. And I did it as kind of a tongue in cheek kind of thing. I think I released the first one in 2013. And 10 years later, I'm on book number 17 in the series. Yes, I'm going state
17.
17, my dear, in this series. Okay. And all the other ones in the series are mail order brides, and Peter is a mail order man. And the name of it is Show Me because it is Missouri. So each one is a different state. Yes. And there are some states that I actually go to, and I'm actually on the ground. I'm actually walking up and down the streets. I'm listening to the lingo. I'm listening to the dialects. I'm listening to the vernacular. So when I'm putting in and putting together the stories, I get readers who comment, "Oh, I know where that restaurant is. I've been there. I've eaten that. Yeah, that's a weird combination, but it's what they eat." So I've had a wonderful time with the entire series. And so it has been absolutely a joy to write, especially going state by state.
Now, see, that leads me into so many other questions when you said
Let's
17.
go. Let's go.
So,
Let's go.
so how long does it take you to write one?
I'm a full-time writer. The process of completing a book can take a year. If I'm writing nonstop, I write 3 to 4,000 words a day. A novel is anywhere between 60,000 and 100,000. 100,000 is more an epic. So my window is usually about 60 to 65,000 words. So 3,000 words a day for 60 words. So 20, 30 days nonstop. But let me explain and let me clarify. I have a series Bible. Everything is laid out. I know exactly what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And so when I sit down to write, it's a movie playing in my head. And when you're reading it, you're actually seeing it play out and you're seeing it happen.
Okay. So you can whip out a few books in a year, basically.
Yes, at my max, I think I did 9 in 1 year. Yeah, I will never do that again.
Do you self-publish or do you work with a publishing house?
I self-publish. Initially, I wanted to go with a publishing house. But when you look at the math is not mathing.
Hmm.
Okay.
And I've heard people say that before.
Yes, the math does not math. And then I am in control of my covers. My characters on my covers look like the characters I've written about inside the book. I can control when it's released, how, this series, there are two a year. There's one in February, and then there's another one in the fall around September, October. So in between that, I can play around with novellas or Christmas stories, or if I want to do a one-off with another series, I can do that as well.
So you've done 17 books in this series,
Mhm.
and you've done other series as well. I
Yes,
assume correct. So what's the total number of books that you have written and published?
I think I'm around with novellas. We're probably around 65, 70.
Oh, wow. That is prolific output. Okay. And then the next set of questions relate to your research
Mhm.
on location.
Yes.
So you travel to several states putting this together.
Yes, yes. We travel a great deal. Usually I start February, we were already out
Mhm.
and back. I have one series that's set in Colombia, South America. We have been to Colombia, South America. We have been on the ground. So when I'm doing the research, I am actually in place. So if I'm writing about Missouri, I actually went to Missouri, Nebraska, all of that. There are places in Georgia that people there's a couple of places, fictional places I've made up
Mhm.
and some
Oh, you
stories.
make up some places too?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I've had people, well, I'm driving down 75 South and I'm looking for the exit and I'm not seeing it. And she's like, my daughter's telling me it's not a real place. But there are real places in Georgia that I have set stories. I have set stories here in Augusta as well. But yes, I do a great deal of research because my characters are real people to me and they have real jobs. So when I was doing the research for this one, and he's a historian, and his focus is Southern religion. So I reached out to Dr. Hayes at AU, who is a history professor, and his is Southern religion. And then I reach out to Corey Rogers at the Lady Museum, who is also a historian. And the character, like Mr. Rogers, is an Omega, and he's
Mhm.
branded as well, like Mr. Rogers. And I
Mhm.
have a couple of moments in there where, Peter is getting all happy and he throws the feet up, and he, I had to throw it in there because it took me back to my days with seeing the dogs walking across the quad. They're, so I did want to include all of those moments in there. But yeah, I take the time to do the research to make sure that what I'm writing is as accurate as can be.
Okay. Now, do you combine the trips with pleasure trips or just strictly business when you're traveling to Missouri or Nebraska or whatever state it is?
For tax purposes, you heard that. For tax purposes, they are business trips.
Okay. Okay. So, when did you start writing? How many years? Because you mentioned that you used to teach. So, when did you sort of shift from being an instructor to being a full-time writer?
2012 is when I started writing full time. Didn't have any idea what I was doing, just did everything absolutely wrong. But I found myself a mentor. I started going to conferences and to workshops, and I started sitting down talking to other authors. Um, I was very happy when I was doing the Augusta Literary Festival and we were bringing authors into the library. And we had them offering little workshops and little sessions. So we had an opportunity to talk to traditionally published as well as those who were doing indie publishing. And publishing has changed so much in the last 10 years. It is so difficult to keep up with everything that's happening in publishing now, even with audiobooks and just trying to keep up. Um, but at the end of the day, what it comes down to is a good story.
All right. So, you've been
Excuse me, one
writing for
moment.
about 15 years. It's a little bit longer than that. Yeah, a little bit longer, 15, 18 years. You've produced about 65 books, 65 to 70 books. All of them are romance novels. Is that right?
Romance and romantic suspense.
And romantic suspense.
Now, the romantic suspense gives my brain a little bit of a break because I was watching John Wick. And when John Wick went off, I think my grandson was watching Wreck-It Ralph. So I combined the two. And I'm like, what about all the other men who lived in the Continental? What if they wanted to get married as well? So I have these hit men who end up rescuing these women and children, and they have these instant families. Now, yeah, in the middle of the book, they go out and, they have to go to work, but they come back home to meatloaf and story time. But I
Mm-hmm.
wanted the bad guys to also have love. What they do for the government. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they don't do it for the pleasure of doing it. They do it out of a necessity, um, and to believe themselves incapable of having somebody to love them because of what they do, and finding out that, yeah, there's still something good inside of me that's worth loving,
Mm-hmm.
to give them a family and to give them these kids who people have thrown away, or these women that people have marginalized or cast to the side, and all of a sudden they've got these nice homes and these men that absolutely will do anything for them, as well as them having that ability to love with everything in them without, you know, fallout and repercussions. So yeah. Yeah, I'm a hopeless romantic. I can't help it.
Yeah, I see that. But when you talk about the suspense novels, I always wonder, like, I don't watch a lot of movies. I don't watch a lot of movies, period, because I'm just not that into stuff. I'd rather hear about reality than fiction, I think.
Okay,
I
okay.
don't watch a lot of movies. But sometimes, obviously I see a little that somebody else in my household is watching, or I hear people talk about something. And I'm just always sitting there going, how did they even come up with this? what, what type of imaginative mind does somebody have to be able to make up that much stuff?
Now, here's the thing, truth is far stranger than fiction.
Reality is indeed stranger than
Yes,
fiction.
it
That is
is.
correct.
And if you're watching the news or if you're looking at Florida news, there's always something going on. But usually, if you're just sitting and you ask yourself, what if? And then you just start putting in all the layers. Well, what if this happens? And then this happens. Well, then what if he says this? And what if she does that? And then what if they have a car accident and the car flips upside down and her leg is broken? How am I going to write that scene? you know, yeah. So you start just adding those layers onto it and you start really developing whether or not this story is character driven or whether or not this story is plot driven. And that's going to determine the pacing of the story as well.
So, when you were a little child, did you have this great imagination and you made up lots of stuff? Did you have like imaginary friends and stuff like that?
No, no, I'm a little bit too much of a realist to have imaginary friends. No, I read a lot as a child. I didn't watch a lot of television because we had two televisions, one downstairs and one upstairs in my aunt's bedroom, and we weren't allowed in there. And usually they were watching Jeopardy or Gunsmoke or something like that, or the Virginian. And if you didn't want to watch what they watched, then you had to go do something else. And usually I was reading. But again, in reading those stories, they did not represent the Black women that I knew. And I knew Black families that had a father and a mother in the house, that it wasn't this toxicity and all of this fighting. Now, I did have people in the family, and I knew people that did have the toxicity and the fighting and the rent parties, all of those kind of things. But my husband and I both come from traditional families where our parents were married. And so I wanted to write stories about the Black women that I knew and the Black women that were not always having an attitude or bitter or had something to prove. And because usually, whenever you read a story with a Black woman, she's got all of this attitude. And it's like, no, we're not all militant and angry. There are a lot of us that are just downright happy.
Mhm, mhm.
And I wanted to write those women.
And so you consider your books to represent positive portrayals of
Yes,
Black love, African American women, African American men.
yes.
Okay.
Now I do write. I want to clarify. I do write interracial as well. I do have Black women that are married to maybe a Hispanic man or a
Mhm,
white guy that lives in up in the mountains that grows his own food and goes out and hunts down Bambi for dinner and he got to grind it up. I have written a Black woman with a Native American man, um, because love doesn't always look like you,
mhm,
and sometimes being a little adventurous can come out different, could
mhm.
have a different result.
Okay. This is so fascinating to me because I've never spoken to anybody who writes romance novels.
Okay.
This is really fascinating to me, how it all comes together. So you've been doing it for a while now,
Yes.
almost 20 years. How much longer do you see yourself doing this? Is this something, when you're 84, you're sitting there, are you still going to be coming up with new ideas?
In an ideal world, some of my books will get published, will get picked up by a movie producer, and they'll make them into movies, and I can sit back and just. But I've been writing since I was what 9, 10 years old. So I'm hoping that writing in some form or another will always be a part of my life. The more active your mind is, the less opportunities you have for, your mind leaving you, because as we age, it's either your body gives out or your mind gives out, one of the two. So I'm hoping to keep my mind active, but I can't see being 75 years old and still publishing books.
Okay. Okay. All right. You got to me. We got so busy talking about relationships, talking about the process of writing. Let me introduce how you came to me as a guest. You're going to be appearing at the Lucy Lane Museum next weekend.
Next Saturday,
Porter
yes.
Rogers, the executive director, asked me, "Hey, I got some upcoming events. Can you help us out with some publicity?" And I was like, "Sure," because I've done this before. And that was how I met you. Had no idea you were here in the Augusta area. Never
Okay.
heard of Olivia Gaines. So it is so good to meet you. But can you
Likewise.
now pause and tell us a little bit about the event that's coming up?
Well, next Saturday, I am going to be talking about the book in detail, and I will be signing books there as well. There will be books available if you haven't already gotten one. So there will be books there available that you'll be able to buy, and I will be signing at the end of our discussion about Show Me. It's going to be a fun conversation at the Laney Museum next Saturday at I think 5:30.
5:30 p.m. Correct. Correct. Okay. And how much do the books cost?
Because I'm self-published, I can set my own price. So I'm only doing them for $10.
$10. Okay. Wow.
$10, yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Bargain entertainment. There's
And
not
that's the
much you can
thing.
get for $10 these days.
I know. And because I am doing it at Delaney, I don't want I want people to enjoy the story, and that's what it's about. A lot of my readers, they come to me because they know I'm going to give them this relaxing, entertaining experience. There are some of the books that are so funny. I've had people, I'm on the train on my way into the city and I'm laughing so hard. People are like, "What are you reading?" And she's like, "I'd have made you 10 sales just on the train alone because people want to know what I'm reading." Or people will read it for date night and they'll find out if I've got a new book coming
Mhm.
out. They want to have date night and they read to each other as well. So,
Okay. I know people can get the book at the museum because you're going to have copies there.
yes.
Will you be giving a talk as well?
Yes, I will. I will be
Okay.
talking and I will be discussing the book and the writing process, as well as some of the initiatives that I'm doing with the Arts Council here locally to help build our writing community. But you can
Okay.
also
Awesome.
get the books online if you want to order ahead of time, if you want to get them on ebook, on Kindle or in ebook form. You can get it at any online retailer because I'm everywhere.
Okay. So you set up on Amazon, which is where I know a lot of people get their books these days.
Yes.
And do you have a website as well?
You can find me at ogaines.com, OGAINES.com.
Okay. All right. So they can order books from the website also.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Um, Before we close out, I do want to also talk some about your work with the Arts Council.
Okay.
When we think arts, a lot of times we think visual arts, we
Mhm.
think dance, music, painting, but writing is indeed an art form in and
It
of
is.
itself.
It is a literary art. And I have been working diligently this past couple of years with the Arts Council. If you guys or anybody was at Arts in the Heart this past year, we did have a tent right in front of the book tavern. And over the weekend, we had over 200 people to come through the tent to talk to us about writing. We met new local authors. We had people who were working on a book, people who wanted to write a book. And so we're doing some things with the Arts Council to make sure that the literary community, the literary arts are also being nurtured as well. And this year for Arts in the Heart, we will be inside where we will have authors selling books at the table and signing, as well as workshops and talks on the writing process.
Okay. All right. If there's anybody out there, a younger person or even an older person, because some people do start writing when they're more mature, if there's somebody that wants to become a novelist, what advice do you give them?
Sit down and write. because a lot of people will start off with an idea and then they'll get another idea in the middle and they'll start writing something else. Or they want to know about the publishing process. And I will tell you honestly, before you can even submit to a publisher, you need to have a product. Sit down and write the story. Write it all the way out, get it all done, get your first edits done. And then once you have the story complete, let's have a conversation.
Okay. Okay. All right. So is that to say that you help other writers too?
If the novel is complete.
Okay. Okay.
And let me qualify that, because there are in the past I've had people to come to me and who were starting to write. And I offered guidance, but the guidance that I offered ended up shutting them down, and they felt intimidated and didn't want to finish. So usually when somebody says, well, I'm working on a book, I want you to read it. Well, let me read it when it's done. That way I know you're serious about the process. And trust me, I teach all over the place. I teach all over the country. I have taught on the Tom Joyner Fantastic Voyage. And
Okay.
I tell people all the time, finish the book first, and then let's have a conversation.
This has been a very enlightening discussion. Before we close out, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
I think that everybody has a story to tell. And if you don't feel comfortable writing it yourself, sit down and keep a journal and keep up with what you're doing as well. And just take a moment to journal and write things down so that you can come back to those ideas. So I do encourage that.
So you one of these people that keeps a notepad next to the bed, keeps a notepad with you wherever you go, or are you now using an electronic device for that purpose? Do you
Mm-mm,
always just
I
have
have
something?
to. I
Okay,
have. Yeah, I
you
have
have
to
to
have
write
something.
that.
Yeah, I have to write it down. And the other thing that I wanted to say, that you'll see the books back here, but I made a companion journal so that couples can do some of the things in the book that Kim and Peter are doing, like date night plans and all of that kind of stuff, making ice cream sundaes, going on dates, kind of cataloging it, taking pictures, having fun with each other. There are coloring pages in here. There's meditation, there's gratitude pages in here, just for you to come back and connect and remind yourself of the reason why you got together. You know,
Okay. So part of your work is literary, but part of it seems to be relationship building as well.
somebody said I was a relationship novelist. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about relationship. It's my relationship with my readers. It's my relationship with my community. But yeah, it's all about relationships and being a friend not only to others, but being a friend to yourself as well.
Okay, cool beans, cool beans. Next Saturday, March
That's
16th,
right.
5:30 p.m. Olivia Gaines will be at the Lucy Craft Lane Museum of Black History, which of course is located on Phillip Street, Augusta, Georgia, 30901. And she will be discussing her book. And I'm sure you're going to take Q&A. So if people have
Yes, yes,
questions
yes, yes. It even
about,
has book club questions in the back if you don't know what to ask.
oh, okay, that too. Okay, cool beans. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Again, I
having
had
me.
no idea that you were in our community, so it's great to know that we have an African American romance novelist right here in our backyard.
Yes, you do.
And I'm just astounded by how prolific you have been in terms of generating ideas and keeping it rolling. So please continue to do what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Facebook family. If you had a chance to join us, thank you so much. We're going to get this on our local matters page. We're going to figure out how to get it on local matters page. Right now, it's on my personal Janice Allen Jackson page. We're also planning to post this on our YouTube channel, Local Matters Podcast of Georgia. It'll be on our Author Talk playlist. Thanks so much for being a part of the family.
Thank you. Goodbye.